In 2019, Universal Studios put on Halloween Horror Nights 29, showcasing houses from many TV shows and movies. They also utilized some of their own houses and past monsters. I was there, and unlike in 2018, I did get through all 10 houses. And I decided, much like in the 2018 version, I wanted to rank all of them. I have some things to say about some of my lesser experiences with the houses, and a lot to say about my higher experiences with the houses. But let's get going. I had a lot of hopes for Depths of Fear. There was something about the underwater aspect that I really liked. I don't know what they could have done with it, but I was thinking about maybe portholes looking out into the ocean. I know it was deep down, so, blackness, but I don't know. Bottom line is, when I saw the announcement, I kind of got excited because I was thinking, hey, an underwater house. What are you going to do with that? I mean, the story of the house is pretty interesting. I think it's a dive team or something along those lines. Go underwater and they encounter monsters, and the monsters get into their facilities and they raise all hell. And when I walked in, I got really pumped. You saw all the underwater hatches. I was like, all right, I think I'm going to get what I was hoping for. But man, when I started walking through it, all these ideas that maybe I was thinking, and I guess you could say it was my expectations were a little too high, and I just got nothing out of the house, and I had a lot of hopes for Depths of Fear, and they just disappointed me around every turn. So, kind of similar to what I said in the last video about Carnival Graveyard having a lot of Easter eggs, I know Nightingales is monsters that they use over and over and over at this event. Well, this is my first experience with them. And the design of the monsters are really cool, and I really like the idea of the Roman times and gladiators and all that stuff. But much like Carnival Graveyard, I think if you don't know what you're walking into, you're going to kind of be more confused than anything else. And you can only really look at the scenery of Blood Pit. And, at its base, that was fine. A lot of what was going on was really cool. There was their big scene, I think, for this house was they had a lion that would come down, and there's always going to be a scene in some of these houses where they have a big scene that is very time reacted, which gives some people a chance of missing it. And I missed that scene. I didn't get to see the big lion at the time, but not knowing some of the background of these houses can really hurt you when you walk in. And that's the reason why Nightingales is lower here, because, the facade was amazing of this house. It's just the backstory is what you, I think, really need to enjoy this house more. And now for the disappointing one, the heartbreaking one of the trip for us with Stranger Things. It was our favorite house of the trip the year before, and it just dropped like a rock this year. Man, there was something about this house that just didn't work this time around. It's really is hard to explain. They tried to shove both the second season and the third season into one house, and to be completely honest, it didn't feel like that was always their plan. It felt like the third season was tacked on, and it didn't work at all. A lot of scenes that I think were really cool in their thought process didn't work in the house itself. When it came to maybe like Will seeing the mind flare, outside of the arcade, it just didn't work because you could tell it was just a doll, seeing, looking at a screen. Same with Bob getting eaten by the Demodogs. It was just a doll laying there with a couple Demodog dolls standing over there. Nothing was moving. There was a lot of things like that just didn't work. However, the reason why it's not in last place is what they say for the end of this house did work. It has probably the coolest thing of any house on this entire list, and that is the Mind Flare puppet at the end of this house. This thing was so cool, so huge. The only problem is that, like anybody who's ever been to this event, you kind of get rushed through the houses, so you didn't get enough time to really appreciate that, big puppet, because man, it was awesome. And now we're kind of out of I don't want to call them bad, I'll call them lackluster houses, and on to what I would say are just the good houses. And that starts with Us. The house that, I think it was pretty much the last of the major houses that was announced for the event. But man, it was a solid one. They have the nice little build-up that goes into every house that uses that location, I've noticed. But man, going through that house, the only complaint I honestly have about that house, and we were all saying it, is they didn't use the obvious music in probably the harshest scene in that entire movie, and that is Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. But I mean, every scene, like that ending scene where you're going through the room of all the people, all the mannequins, but you don't know which mannequin's alive. It's a great scene. The recreation of the big old, I don't know, the Vision Quest or whatever it is, that Funhouse thing at the beginning, walking through it was amazing. I mean, yeah, Us was a really good house, and it was the start of, I think, the good houses of HHN 29. So, Graveyard Games was a favorite, I remember hearing, for Halloween Horror Nights 29. I remember liking it, but the problem with thinking back to it this year was it kind of really blurred in. I only remember a couple things from it. I do remember really liking it, though. That's why I struggled putting it very high on the list. I feel that if something doesn't stand out and isn't super memorable, I really have a hard time putting it, very high on the list. But it had a very interesting, idea behind it. I know that there was like this big social media push with it. I can't remember, it might have been Facebook or Twitter, that you could interact with the house or something like that. I don't know. None of us did it, though. But I know that if you did do that, you could get the story of the house and what was going on, even though it was kind of an obvious story with these kids kind of breaking into a graveyard and, kind of pissing off the spirits and they were coming out to get him. Yeah, either way, the house was really cool. And all you just watching it back, you can see that it has some really cool ideas in it. It is a very solid house. It just didn't stick with me the way I would hope it would for a house that would be, top 2 or 3. And now we're into the first of 2 of what I would classify as the fun houses of the 2019 Halloween Horror Nights. And this is seemingly, I say becoming a trend, even though there's only been 2 Halloween Horror Nights since this one. But I hope it's a trend that continues because I like these fun houses and I liked Killer Clowns from Outer Space. If you're a fan of this particular B movie, you are going to be a fan of this house. Every single little, scene from the movie that's memorable is in this house, whether it be the puppet show, or the little pizza delivery scene, or even just going through the ship. The other thing that's so familiar with this house is the smells. And I know I've talked before about smells at Disney parks. Yeah, Universal likes to do this with Halloween Horror Nights too. But going through this particular house, you got hit a lot with scents of popcorn and cotton candy. It worked very well. It was very memorable. It stuck in your head. And then also done very well, but not as well as Stranger Things, was a massive Clownzilla that was just there looming over you. It was awesome. I loved the Killer Clowns house. It was a great time. So enjoyable. I love the fun houses. I want Halloween Horror Nights to keep doing fun houses. All right, so probably the biggest surprise house of the entire night was House of a Thousand Corpses. I had no expectations for this house. If anything, when it was announced, I was a little disappointed. I don't know what I wanted. I wanted a better house. I wanted a better name. But, it's a movie that I enjoyed when I was younger. And then when I got older, I just didn't enjoy as much. But I was like, whatever. I'm here. I'm going to go through all the houses. So let's go through House of a Thousand Corpses. And it was honestly a big shock. Acknowledging the outside facade of the house was, first of all, amazing. It was just a recreation of the, gas and chicken restaurant from the movie. But just how they, they always are very faithful to going through the movies in a lot of ways. But when you got to the point where it was time to go underground and then get to the Dr. Satan stuff, it was just fantastic. And I remember later on down the line, when we got home, I decided I wanted to look at what the Hollywood version was like. And it was awful in comparison to the Orlando version. A lot of the other houses that the two shared were they weren't similar, but they were pretty close to quality wise. But man, not House of a Thousand Corpses. I mean, House of a Thousand Corpses in Orlando was one of the best houses, whereas, that California one was quite pathetic. As for the house that I was probably looking forward to the most of the original ones, it was the Yeti. And I gotta say, it didn't disappoint. It was kind of everything I was expecting it to be. I was just expecting to stroll through the cabins of, a mountain, and be attacked by a Yeti, and it just didn't disappoint. You get to see a whole lot of mountain men getting dismembered by a Yeti, a lot of great jump scares, some cool effects with, the Yeti punching through a guy. There's a scene where you get to go through the caves of the Yeti, and it's always done well. Well, I remember it being very cold walking through the caves, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't remember if it was very cold or if it's a memory of something that I wanted it to be, but I don't think it really matters because that's just kind of it added to what that house was. It's hard to describe because the reason why the house worked was, the scares. I feel like for the original houses, that one did have the most scares. It had the most little angles for the Yeti to jump out. It had the most set scenes. It worked the best, and it was the one that lived up to the most expectations. From the most anticipated original house to the most anticipated movie house for me, Ghostbusters. I didn't exactly know how to take a Ghostbusters house off the bat. And then you had the Killer Clowns house. I don't remember which one was announced first. But then I just kind of went with the mindset of, all right, let's do some fun houses. And once you just kind of accepted it and you said, all right, let's see what a fun house was like. Oh, it was great. I mean, the funhouse type environment, as I said with Killer Clowns, I really hope they keep doing because I have enjoyed, I guess, the three of them to this point right now. And I might say Ghostbusters was my favorite of all three of them. They all stay very close to the movies. I mean, come on, going through the library at the beginning. I love how they were using the Pepper's Ghost effect from the Haunted Mansion stuff on the Slimer gimmick. You get to see Stay Puft, even though it was the worst of the big monster things, I guess you want to say, that Halloween Horror Nights did that year. I mean, the lines that were constantly spouted out from the movie, everything you would have wanted in a Ghostbusters house was in this house, and it made for just a fun experience. And I don't know what more you could possibly want from a fun house, and that is clearly what they were trying to go for with this. And it's what makes me say I want them to keep doing this. There are so many movies that you can do this kind of house with. So just please keep doing it. And now for Universal Monsters, my favorite house, and once again, it was kind of unanimous, everybody's favorite house this year. This house had a lot of just quality scares in it. And I was the only one who walked into this house with a little bit of a bias to it. I am a huge fan of the old classic Universal monster movies. So I was okay. Let's do some, Phantom of the Opera, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Everybody else, I was with couldn't have cared less. But they all came out loving it. So I was pumped for it. But I mean, where I started falling in love with this house is, you get going, and they kind of started out with like the Wolfman and things like that. But where I was really starting to feel the house is, I mean, they got you into like the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and they really made it feel like you were underwater. And the Hunchback from Notre Dame is like going up and down the bell. So the Phantom of the Opera was like the effects that they were using to make the walls disappear and reappear. Listen, I can go on and on about this house. This was just my favorite house. Universal Monsters, it's kind of hard for me to articulate why I felt it was my favorite house, other than to everybody basically that it had a lot of good scares. For me, it was because they were utilizing these characters that I love. And if you love those characters, you're going to fall in love with this house. They do Frankenstein so well. Well, Frankenstein's monster. They do Dracula so well. I mean, you expect them to use those characters like the Wolfman, the Creature from Black Lagoon. Then they pull out, the Bride of Frankenstein for the little jump scares at the end, and they're just done to perfection. It worked great. I loved the Universal Monsters. And that was Halloween Horror Nights 29. It was a great Halloween Horror Nights. I would say, comparing it to 2018, I felt the houses overall were probably better, even though on the low end, I felt that there were just some low end houses. But, when the houses were good, they were just better than they were in 2018. This event, I think, as far as the houses are concerned, definitely keeps getting better and evolving. I know some people might not agree with that statement, but, hey, that's what opinions are, right? But, hey, I was also there this year, and I am going to have a ranking of Halloween Horror Nights 30 coming out fairly soon. I hope you watch that one as well. Until then, I thank you for watching this video. I hoped you liked it. And if you did, please subscribe, and thank you.